call this meeting of the Carson City Historic Resources Commission on Thursday, January 10th, 2019, at the Community Center Sierra Room to order.
Roll call. Chair Drews.
Here.
Vice Chair Darney. Commissioner Block.
Here.
Commissioner Hayes.
Here.
Commissioner Schmitter.
Here.
Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Spilda.
Here.
A quorum's present.
Hope for the record, the public notice is 2018.
That's always
Next item is public comments. Members of the public who wish to address the commission may approach the podium at this time to speak on matters relevant to or within the authority of the Historic Resources Commission, including any matter that is not specifically included on the agenda as an action item. No action may be taken on a matter raised under this public comment portion of the agenda. Is there any public comment?
I'm really excited. Hope Sullivan, Planning Manager. We have a special guest with us tonight. Newly elected Clerk Treasurer Aubrey Roulette.
Clerk recorder.
Clerk Recorder. What'd I call you?
I don't want another hat. Clerk treasurer.
Oh, she's Clerk Recorder. I stand corrected. So nobody invited her here. She realized how important this commission was and came over to meet everybody and to see what you do. So with that, Aubrey.
Thank you.
Good.
I just wanted to put a face behind my name and just introduce myself. You guys are in good hands with all of our recording secretaries, but I'm here if you need anything.
Good to meet you, thanks. Anybody want to get sworn in as long as?
Yeah.
Any other public comment? Hearing none, we'll move to item C for possible action. Approval of the minutes from September 13th, 2018 and December 3rd, 2018 joint meeting with the Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee. Do I have a motion?
I move we approve the minutes for the two meetings as written by staff.
Motion.
Can I just note I was absent for one of them, so I can only vote on one.
Do you want to take them separately?
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. You want to amend that?
We can take them separately because there's an extension.
Okay.
Okay. Start with September.
I move we approve the minutes for the Thursday, September 13th, 2018 meeting.
Motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We have the minutes for the joint meeting on December 3rd, 2018.
I move that we approve the minutes from the December 3rd, 2018 meeting.
Second?
I second.
Motion and a second. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Mr. Chair, do we have an abstention? On the first one. Oh,
I didn't, I'm sorry, I didn't say anything, but yes, I was abstained.
Yeah, on the September 13th, there was Greg
Wasn't there.
so he. Okay. D, modification of the agenda. Items on the agenda may be taken out of order. The public body may combine two or more agenda items for consideration, and the public body may remove an item from the agenda or delay discussion relating to an item on the agenda at any time. E, public hearings for possible action. E1, HRC-18-175. To discuss and potentially provide input as a consulting party pursuant to Section 106 review to determine if the South Carson Street Complete Streets project will have an adverse effect on any property listed or eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. The project involves improvements to South Carson Street from 5th Street to Appian Way. Hope.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hope Sullivan, Planning Manager. Most of you heard the presentation last month at the joint meeting with RAC regarding the South Carson Street project. As the project will utilize federal funds, a Section 106 review is required. The objective of the Section 106 review is, one, to determine if there are properties that would qualify for the National Register or which are listed on the National Register of Historic Places would be impacted by the project. 2, to determine if the impact would be adverse. And 3, to identify mitigations that should be considered. The HRC is a consulting agency in the Section 106 review. I have consulted with SHPO staff regarding properties that could be potentially impacted. That doesn't mean negatively impacted, but potentially impacted, and I did include that list in the staff report. Tom Grundy from our Public Works Department is prepared to make a presentation. At the conclusion of the presentation, I know we have members of the public here to speak on the item, or at least to observe the item. And then I think it's appropriate for the HRC as a consulting agency to ask or to identify any historic resources that may be impacted by the project, determine if the impact is adverse, and if they do identify an adverse impact on a qualifying historic resource, to identify mitigation that would be appropriate. The applicant will be consulting with other agencies as part of the Section 106 review, and they're assembling additional input. So this is one of many opportunities they're taking to obtain input for the Section 106 review. Unless there's questions, I'll turn it over to Tom Grundy. I'm not turning it over yet. You have late material at your seats, and there's late material for the public as well. The late material shows the project site, and it shows the year of the buildings along that corridor. The chairman was able to prepare this, and he includes a spreadsheet with detailed information about the properties constructed before 1980 as an attachment to that. So I want to make sure everyone understands this late material is associated with this project or this item. And with that, I will turn it over to Tom Grundy. Thank you.
Tom Grundy with Carson City Public Works. And I'm here to talk about the South Carson Complete Streets Project. You saw a presentation last month, and I've done a new presentation that just kind of focuses on the historic aspects of this project. So you're not going to be seeing the same thing all over again. But we'll start out with an overview and why we're here, and then the list of potentially impacted areas that we got from SHPO, talk about the outreach that we've done to some of the facilities along the route, give you a status of where we are on the project today, and we've got an updated fly-through of the project. And at the end, something that's really important to us is just how to get in contact with us about the project. So talk about the communication tools. So the project overview starts at the north end on 5th Street and continues south down the Carson Street corridor to Appian Way. It consists of a lot of pieces: storm drain, mostly on the north end, landscaping, a multi-use path along the east side that ends at Stewart Street. We're doing enhanced business access along the corridor, street lighting along the frontage road. We're doing some improvements. We're doing a roundabout at Stewart Street, illuminated pedestrian crossings, and water, sewer, and storm drain utility improvements. And the reason we're here tonight is we're asking you to identify any historic resources that may be impacted by the project and determine if that impact is an adverse impact and suggest any mitigation to address those adverse impacts. We did some outreach to 3 agencies: the United States Forest Service, Carson Ranger District Office, which is on the site of the old Gardner Ranch, the Nevada State Railroad Museum, which has now, they've got the Wabusca Depot at their location, and then the Washoe Environmental Protection Department for the Washoe Tribe. And SHPO identified a number of potentially impacted areas. Some of them were discrete locations. Others just kind of span the whole alignment of the project. Jack's Bar, Bank Saloon at the southwest corner, or the northwest corner of Carson and 5th Street. And then SHPO identified any archaeology associated with the historic Gardner Ranch, which is down in the area where the Forest Service offices are now. And then the Wabusca Railroad Station and Depot, which of course is at the Railroad Museum. And then the potentially impacted areas that span the corridors, the V&T Railroad and associated structures, the Carson route of the Mormon Immigrant Trail, which SHPO indicated pretty much that's on the entire project. Any archaeology associated with any of the other historic buildings along the area of potential effect. So this late material from the chair is very helpful, and we appreciate that. Any historic buildings along the corridor that are currently unevaluated, and then any sites that are currently unevaluated for eligibility. So these next slides show kind of the discrete locations of the areas that Chippo identified and what we're going to be doing in those locations. And the first location is the Jack's Bar Banks Saloon area. And up there, we're replacing a water line that starts from 5th Street and goes down to about 9th Street. We're replacing it in the same trench where the existing water line is. And then we're doing, surface improvements, roadway treatments, pocket parking, things like that are in the existing right-of-way and in the existing disturbed area of the existing South Carson Street. The Gardner Ranch, U.S. Forest Service, that's where we're constructing the roundabout, and we're staying within the disturbed area for the surface improvements. But just south of the Shell Station driveway, the southern Shell Station driveway, we're replacing a storm drain line that comes across the street there. And then farther to the south, kind of at the end of the picture, we're putting in a new storm drain line. So in undisturbed area, we're doing a storm drain crossing that takes it over to that linear park area, takes the stormwater over to that linear park area. So there's some new disturbance there. And then along the frontage of the Railroad Museum where the Wabusca Railroad Depot is, we're doing storm drain along the west side of Carson Street. And that's new storm drain, so it'll be newly disturbed area. And those excavations will go down roughly 8 feet. And I've got a project fly through. This is updated from the one you saw last time, and I can kind of talk about the improvements that we're doing that are in the context of the fly through. So we start up at the Ormsby House where we've got the water improvements. And so the new water line will come down along about in the center of the roadway, actually. And here's where the new storm drain starts. It'll be on the east side of the road, around 8th Street, 9th Street. And so new storm drains still all along here. And you can see the really no improvements on the west side of the roadway, and on the east side of the roadway we're adding parking and landscaping. And as we approach a roundabout, that's where we start doing the storm drain crossings. So here, as we approach the Shell Station, is the first of the storm drain crossings. And the second storm drain crossing, and that first storm drain crossing is a replacement of an existing storm drain, so it's previously disturbed. The second one is right about past the nose of this splitter island for the roundabout, and that's a new storm drain. And then now on the west side is storm drain that's coming up from Road Street. So, and that's all new storm drain in previously undisturbed areas. So now we're along the wetlands that are north of the Railroad Museum. And the Wabusca Depot is here. And we're doing obviously, we're doing a lot of improvements along the east side of the roadway, but they're within the existing right-of-way and the existing disturbed area. They're what we call the roadway prism. So, the asphalt in the base sections. And the rest of this, I don't know if you want to go the whole way down, but it's kind of just pretty much the same thing. The storm drain ends at Road Street, and it's pretty much just surface improvements all the way down to Appian Way. Really no underground work, so I don't know, I'll stop the video here, since it's just the same thing for a while.
Tom, I have a question.
Yeah.
Does your graphic program take us all the way down to that monument where there's going to be some artwork? Or is that outside this area?
Oh, the new monument? That is, that's at the roundabout at Stewart Street. So just past the Shell Station where those storm drain crossings are. If you want, I can back up and show you that again. So the project status is January and February. We're scheduled to be at the 60% design at the end of January, the end of this month. In May, the 90% design will be done, and July will be 100% design. We're having another public meeting and workshop in probably early February, and that's where we're going to meet with individual business owners or any individual that wants to come in and talk about the project and how it relates to a certain location. The first public meeting was more a broad overview of it. In the second one, it'll probably be at the Community Development Department in their building, and people can come down and point to a location on a map, and we can talk about that location with them. In January and February, we're going to do board and committee updates at RAC, RTC, and the Board of Supervisors, and then 90% we'll do at the same in April and May. Construction will start at the end of 2019 and continue through 2020. And the communication tools for the project, carsonproud.com is probably the best place just to get information on it. We've got a text information service that we send out text messages once or twice a month. As construction ramps up, those will probably go on a higher rate. And so, but you can text Carson Proud to 31996 to sign up for that. Social media, any of the Carson City Facebook pages will take you to basically Carson Proud to get information. And anybody can always email me at tgrundy@carson.org. So that's the end of my presentation, and I'm prepared to answer any questions.
I think sheet 12 has the roundabout.
Yep.
Mindset, and do I have that mindset?
Yep. And so the sculptural artwork we will be putting in the center of the roundabout. That's on sheet 12. And we haven't hired an artist yet to figure that out, but it's basically we had a meeting with a bunch of people, and what came out of that meeting was a sculptural element with clean, simple lines that incorporated local culture. So that's kind of our marching orders moving forward for what we're going to put in the center of the roundabout.
Tom, I noticed in the fly-through, it looks like street lighting is similar to what's downtown now to just about the train museum, and then it goes to the overhead Cobras.
That's correct.
Can you extend that, can you extend the lower stuff just past the train museum to kind of tie in with the historic part of that? I think it's probably 2 or 3 light standards there. I'm just thinking of thematically trying to keep that in.
Yeah, we could sure look at doing that. We thought carry it down to Fairview just to continue that downtown theme, but yeah, I don't see why we couldn't continue it on down in front of the Railroad Museum.
The roads are the next block, and the Cobras just look funny.
They do.
At the train museum.
Yep.
The other question I have is, do you have a cultural resource consultant on board? for the project to look at. There's an identification phase to section 106 where you go through and someone looks for those properties similar to what I did here.
Yep.
Do you know when they'll have a report out? Because that's what, the other two, we can give you ideas of what we think may be there. Their report really will inform us what's there, and then we can look at project effect and things like that when we know better what the resources are.
Yep.
Or what they find out.
Yeah, we're in the process now of getting it's Cardno is our consultant, and we're getting them on board to take us through the whole NEPA process, including the section 106.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, you're playing with a street that's already there. You're putting in light standards that are completely compatible. I don't see that the project can have an adverse effect, but you have to go through the process and identify those things. So we look forward to seeing that report, I guess.
I got a question for you, Tom. On your drawings, right, is there any place along especially on the northern end where obviously the right-of-way is narrower, is there any place that your project goes outside the boundaries of the highway or the main street right-of-way, back into the neighborhoods on these fingers that interact with it?
It goes in on a couple of the driveways.
Yeah.
That's it.
The only concern I have, and we've talked about this for years, is Jack's Bar and the unstable nature of its existence currently with the sidewalk. And that it's kind of been determined, everybody I've been talking to, that the sidewalk and the seismic activity is pushing against that. Is that something that has been talked about? Is that something we could fix at that time when we're doing the sidewalks there? Because obviously the sidewalks are part of your project, I assume.
Yeah, we're not doing any sidewalks on the north side of Fifth Street. We're not doing any sidewalks on the north side of Fifth Street, just on the south side of Fifth Street.
So that's kind of a moot point at this point then. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I believe there's public comment.
Yeah, is there any other commissioner comments, questions?
I have a question. I saw that the Mormon Trail was identified, but what about the Carson Valley to Esmeralda Toll Road?
I don't know if that's been,
It's important.
I don't think that's been identified yet. There's that, I mean, the other thing I was thinking about is with your new storm drains. As long as you're in the existing trench, we're fine. The new stuff, especially downtown, there may be some archaeology there. I know when we did the Main Street project, there were a couple V&T features that were in the street right there. But that's something your consultant should be aware of too, that we may have some buried features, culverts and things like that, or historic culverts in that corridor.
Yep.
Is there any other?
So Mike, would that go along with what Carson Tahoe Lumber and Flume Company had as their lumber yard with the two sets of V&T tracks? Does that go down that main did that go down where the main corridor is now?
Yeah, the storm drain you're putting in on the east side from Road Street, or that section, is where the lumber yard is. So there's some potential. Be interesting to see it, if it's an 8 feet invert. You might get into something. I mean, it's one of those things where the consultant can address it if there's a potential. They could come up with ways to mitigate or monitor so that we know. When we did Main Street, it was just on an on-call situation where if they ran into something, they called and we dealt with it. Is there any other commission member questions or comments?
Are we looking at any interpretation because of the importance of this roadway historically?
I think that would come out of the consultant's report. If there is an adverse effect or if there's the potential, then that should be one of their recommendations. Any other questions or comments? Public comment? Hi.
My name is Dan Thielen. I'm the director of the Nevada State Railroad Museum. As it stands, we don't have any issues with what's happening. We would welcome the lighting to continue on down towards Road Street to include the museum as part of the city as we develop ourselves to become an anchor to that end of the property. Had two questions. Are the lights staying at Fairview?
The traffic signals?
Yes.
Yes, the traffic signal stays at Fairview. It gets modified so the new lane, it fits with the new lane configuration.
Excellent, thank you. And then on the west side of Carson Street, as it parallels the museum, where you're putting in the new sewer line, is it possible to enhance the landscaping and put a short wall along the walkway there?
That's something we can look at.
Would you mind?
Yep, we'll definitely look at that.
We'd like to sort of tie up our property edge a little bit and just dress it up a little bit, and that might help us.
That might help. Okay.
We don't see any problems with the Wabusca Depot encroachment on that. I just can't see that there'd be any issues that would ever bring up. The property across Carson Street where the National Guard used to be was all the lumber and fluming company yard. I formerly was a planner for the Nevada National Guard and was in charge of the demolition of that area where we were careful when we buried things because of the artifacts that could have been there. It's a great site to do interpretation. And we'd love to work with you as that kind of develops, because there is some astounding images of that site.
Tom, you might have your consultant make sure they get in touch with Dan, and
We'll do that.
it's one of those, the archaeology is tough, because if you don't see it on the surface, it's really hard to anticipate it. And if we've got somebody who knows there may be some there and knows some of that history, it'd be great. So.
That would be really helpful. Anything we can do to help. It's a good plan. We like what Carson City's doing. So,
Thank you.
Tom, do you know where the sandstone from the treatment plant went? The old sandstone wall?
The sandstone from the treatment plant, I think went out and last time I saw it was stored out at the landfill. And that was several years ago.
Because when Dan talked about that wall, the first thing that popped to my mind was, yeah, we got a bunch of sandstone that we had in the wall. Why not work with that? So
Wouldn't a wood frame structure be more,
you could. I mean,
okay, just saying.
if you're doing a low wall, sandstone fits with what we've got too. But,
Yeah, we have to consider longevity, maintenance, all those considerations for
Rob, can
public
you
use.
turn your mic?
Yeah, we'd have to consider when we do a low wall like that, you have to consider the longevity and, public is going to be involved with a sidewalk on one side and the museum on the other, so it can't be, a wood fence is nice, but I don't know how realistic that is.
well, or something more compatible with the railroad yard?
well, there's already a wood fence there. And I think what Dan's asking for is something that's kind of between a fence and curb height to break that terrain up a little more.
Okay.
So that might also include berms and things like that, kind of mixed together, like we would hide a parking lot in any normal project, is kind of what it sounds like to me.
Is there any other public comment?
I just want to clarify, I did consult with SHPO's office. As a courtesy, they provided that list to me. I don't want to infer that represents a really thorough research project on the part of SHPO. It was just a launching pad for discussion. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so Tom, if you could, when your consultant gets their Section 106 report done, if you could run that by us, we could review it quick and chime in on those comments, and that should take care of us addressing your project effect and mitigation measures too. So,
Okay,
Okay,
we will do that.
thank you. We don't need a motion on this, do we?
Thank you.
Next item is E2 for possible action, HRC-18-185, to discuss and potentially provide input as a consulting party pursuant to a Section 106 review to determine if the replacement of a roof will have an adverse effect on property listed or eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. The property is located at 501 West King Street, APN 003-206-01. Hope.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Brewery Arts Center is seeking brownfield funding through NDEP. As these funds include federal funds, a Section 106 review is required. Again, we just reviewed the objective of the Section 106 review to determine if it will impact any properties that are listed on or will qualify for the National Register of Historic Places, to determine if that impact is adverse, and to identify what mitigations might be appropriate to avoid the adverse impact. HRC is a consulting agency in the Section 106 review. Just lost my spot, sorry. I do have, this is a little, it's on topic but off topic. I do have some pictures courtesy of Jed Block of the subject property, and you can see how it's evolved over time, and I'm not sure that it's retained its character. The goal is to re-roof the building as it exists today. So we have a picture up on the board of the church in 1910. There's then another picture of the church in the 1940s. We then have a picture of the church in the 1980s, and you can see it now has brick as opposed to being a wood structure, and it has additions on it. And here is the building as it exists today. So it certainly has evolved, but the reason we're here today is because Gina Hill, the Executive Director of Brewery Arts Center, is present. She is seeking the brownfield funding to replace the roof of this facility, and it is subject to a Section 106 review. So with that, I'll let Gina make some comments and then turn it over to the board.
Thanks, Hope. Gina?
Thank you, Gina Hill with the Brewery Arts Center. We intend to maintain the structural integrity and the visual integrity of what you see today. We just want a brand-new roof that doesn't leak.
I think that's a great idea.
You're going to replace it with same asphalt shingles and things like that?
Yeah, we did get Environmental Protection Agency to come in and look at it and they did a full assessment, and they will be taking out and disposing of the hazardous materials that are in there.
I'm confused. In order to review this under Section 106, there's some documentation that we need. I mean, we have slides. We can see that the building has been changed, that it's lost its integrity, its historic integrity. We know that we're replacing with existing or in-kind materials, but there's no document to support any of that. If this had come before HARC as a roof replacement, we would have done it administratively, and it would have been fine. If SHPO wants us to review this 106 process, we need a little more documentation from them. I'm kind of at a loss why we're approving it for SHPO before we're reviewing it ourselves.
Again, if we look at our last item, there was no motion. What's happening is we're really early in the process, and so the direction that different agencies, if you will, are receiving is you have a certified local government, go speak to their resource commission and determine if the resource commission has local knowledge of any historic resources. So we're at the very beginning. So I appreciate your frustration, but right now what they're trying to do is just get input. I think your comment at the last item was a good one, and it's probably appropriate at this time too. When the consultant has pursued the Section 106 review, before the acceptance of the report, we'd like to see the report. And at that point, you'll have the analysis and you can see. But this is just a very early input consultation where they're saying to you as the local community, and SHPO, since we're CLG, a certified local government, is saying, please go talk to the local HRC and get their input.
Thanks, Hope. So Gina, the reason that we're going through 106 is because of brownfields and EPA,
Right.
which is putting you on a track to do more than if you'd just come before ARC and wanted the approval. So as long as you understand that, that's fine, and we would like to see the final report. Are there commission member questions or comments?
Yeah, if you look on the back where the green room is, the little, the L shape that comes off the back of it, when you see where the cement shingles that have that asbestos in them came off, you can see cut cedar shingles behind it, and it was painted some sort of red. And we know that they bricked the building up in 1949. They poured a whole stem wall around the perimeter, maybe had a consultant say that the sandstone foundation wasn't going to hold up or whatever, but that's when it was bricked up. And probably, I'm guessing, that's probably a guess, in 1949 is when they reshingled the whole thing with the wonderful cement shingles on there. But as far as a recommendation, I think I talked to one of the consultants today looking for old pictures, but maybe can we make a recommendation of, on my office, I did the Serpentine Manor House shingles that look like a cut shingle as best you can with the asphalt shingle, and keeping some of the potentially colors that might have been in the district at the time. And I don't think I'd want to see a metal roof on here, because I know it was cut cedar at the beginning of it. And you can see the L right there on the back side. And then they did confirm that Peter Kavanaugh did build the church in 1871, and that was probably completed sometime around when the Capitol building was. So, I mean, I'd like to see something that's compatible, maybe in an asphalt shingle that's not a 30-year thing, but with like the certainties that are more of a high end that we could put a color into, or that they could.
I think, once again, that's if a consultant's going to review this, then they could come up with some recommendations. I mean, in terms of...
Specific materials.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question. Are you planning to restore the cupola? It's in pretty bad shape.
Yeah, that's gonna go along with it.
Okay, good.
And I think as well, I think the church, if it wasn't so high, they'd like to have the cross back. And I don't know if being on an art center or performance hall, if that church is necessary, or what would the commission feel about that?
Should be on display, I think. My perspective should be on display, not necessarily a feature of the building as a, people, we don't want people confusing it with the church that it used to be. But it'd be proper to have it, I would think, my opinion, have it displayed maybe in the lobby or something like that.
Any other questions or comments?
I think it's great that you're re-roofing the building. It's a wonderful building, and we hate to lose it, so that's great.
Yeah, I think our first blush is that there wouldn't be an adverse effect from putting a roof or anything on that building. So we'll start there and then hopefully see plans and get reports and move on from that.
All right.
Okay? Thank you, Gina. Oh, is there any public comment on this item? Hearing none, we'll move to E3 for discussion only, HRC-18-189, discussion regarding any follow-up desired based on the joint meeting with the Redevelopment Agency Advisory Committee, RAC, conducted on December 3rd, 2018.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The chair and I discussed the agenda, and he suggested we include this so that we did just have the meeting last month. We covered the following four items. You had a presentation from Aaron West on the plans for Jack's Bar. You had a presentation on the South Carson Street Complete Streets project, a presentation from SHPO staff regarding the federal tax credit program for rehabilitating historic buildings, and you received an overview from the Community Development Director of the Redevelopment Facade Program. So as opposed to just sort of letting that go away, we want to give the commission the opportunity to identify if there was any follow-up for a future agenda based on the conversations you had at the meeting with RAC.
Anybody want to start? The only thing I could think is that we could look at the CLG program and maybe get inventory done. That was one of the things that we talked about with RAC at the meeting, was at least starting with an inventory of that downtown redevelopment area.
I was thinking that one of the things that we heard at the conference for commissioners is that our role is really education and outreach. And I know Judd would too, but I certainly would be willing to talk to any applicant about their property, because it's most likely a building that's at least 50 years old. And I think if people are educated about what their facade used to look like, they might be more interested in taking it back to a certain time period instead of creating something that doesn't harmonize with the streetscape.
Yeah, along that line, could you notice us when RAC meets? Because a commission member showing up at their meeting and I think the meeting was really beneficial for both groups, because we're aware of them, they're aware of us now. And I just think, occasionally showing up at a meeting and reminding them that most of their properties are historic and adjacent to our district is something to look at. And, at some point we can talk about maybe doing a downtown commercial historic district or something like that with them too. Or we can talk about it and bring them into the discussion, so.
I think using inventory funds would be a great way to reach out to the landowners, the property owners, and identify their buildings and maybe show them the pictures and their history for each one as part of our inventory process with the CLG funding.
I have a question with the RAC, and obviously you're referring to area number 1. Would it be possible for an inventory to be able to augment the CLG grant with redevelopment funds? Is that something that the redevelopment area would be concerned with or involved with? Lee?
Yeah, good evening. Lee Plumel, Community Development Director. So that is certainly a possibility that redevelopment funds could be used, especially if it's used for some matching or to support it. I think that's something we can look at. And I was writing down back there because this is the time of year when we start to look at budgets for next year after July 1st and coming up with ideas. So that's something I can put in there, and I'll work with Hope in terms of the timing of how that might work with the CLG funding to see if there's an interest in that on the redevelopment side.
Yeah, because if we could use funds or just some of their time, some of the committee's time for match would help. I mean, that's the problem we're having with the CLG funds, is just finding that match.
When we put in for the blue line, we were using redevelopment money in part for the match.
And thinking about it, when I went away from the meeting, I didn't know how that would work, but if they're giving money for the facade program and they know about us, and maybe give them some guidance on when they ask somebody, you're doing a facade, have you thought about going back to the original facade or an older facade? And a perfect example would be 410 North Carson Street, because when the old Globe opened back up there in 51, they had the pillars out, and then they got covered over, and then they unearthed the pillars. So as you go farther south down to the Gather, there's still, the next building over, there's still boxes around, probably a few metal pillars. But it would be nice to kind of wet their whistle on restoring something back to the way it was.
Any more questions or comments from the commission?
I found, I'm in agreement with the last couple of comments. When I get a new client that purchases a property down in the historic district, one of the first things they always ask me is what did this used to look like, and what can we do to bring it up to modern so we can live in the place. And we're doing an example of that. Is the one on Curry Street. Can't remember the name of the address. Yeah, 402 North Curry, where we are putting the porch back on the front. And that was based on historic photographs and documentations and plans. And that was one of the clients that came with that intent when they moved here, which is fairly rare. But it would be helpful to have that information to people that don't even consider it when they move here. The thought never crossed their mind. And then they kind of start from scratch. That would be helpful to, like Jed said, to kickstart their idea process with something positive for the city.
Just a brief comment. I'm just listening here, but when I was listening at the previous meeting, it was like, we just need to be more involved. I mean, you just need to be able to put the options out there, as we're saying, so folks, I mean, they may bite on what you think's the best option or not, depending on what the rules are and so on, but we've sort of been out of the loop, it felt like to me, and it is right next to the historic district, and it is, in fact, mostly historic. So.
I think, Carson is a very historic town, and we have a lot of public buildings that the state owns that we're doing the highest level of preservation, and then we have the historic district where we are overseeing that type of preservation and rehabilitation, and then we have our downtown where it just seems like there's no, consistency. Yeah, so that's just, and even if it's an informal process, I'm happy to come to a meeting and do a little preliminary research on the building and give an overview, because it is education and that's our role. And then they can make the decisions.
Any other comments, questions? Any public comment? Hearing none, I think you've got some direction. E4 for possible action to approve the historic, HRC-18-187 to approve the Historic Resources Commission Annual Report for 2018 to be presented to the Board of Supervisors. Hope.
Okay, I've placed a draft report to the Board of Supervisors for your annual report in your packet. A couple just minor things I highlighted are that you did review 37 projects this year. You did handle the Historic Preservation Awards. You sponsored the scavenger hunt, and we've received 22 responses on that. I included a new section based on kind of what you've been doing at your meetings called upcoming work program items. Windows, I think, are something you are about to pursue, just like you pursued the fences to clarify the ordinance or the design standards. There's also been talk, and I put this in, although you've never actually said 100% you want to do it, so I probably maybe need to remove it. But you've talked about using the federal tax credit program in conjunction with the facade program and looking for a way to sort of dovetail those two items. So I don't know if that's something you want to pursue, or what I'm now hearing from your last item is maybe what you want to pursue is an inventory of the downtown so that you can maybe be helpful in the RAC's facade program based on the information we gather in the inventory. So with that, I'll leave it to you. It's your report, and I can edit it as you see fit. Thank you.
Yeah, I think if you leave that in, Hope, and add the inventory as well. I mean, my impression of the federal tax credit program is if you've got 3 years to play, it works. If you're trying to take some money from the facade improvement program and get it done within 6 months, it's going to be a challenge. But let's leave it in because I think it's out there. If somebody wants to tackle it, we'd be happy to help them with it. Member comments?
Cat's name is C.
What meeting is this going to?
I'll coordinate with you whether or not it's the 1st or 2nd February meeting.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Is there any expectation that there's going to be any concern over previous motions of this committee from the board?
I don't think so. I think, generally when we do our annual report, we just go through the list, tell them what we've done, and and give them some idea where we're headed. Or that's usually a question they ask, so I'm glad Hope has included it.
Yeah, what we added a couple years ago, maybe last year actually, maybe not 2 years ago, is that no decisions of the HRC were appealed. Any decision you make can be appealed to the Board of Supervisors, and in fact, it was appealed a couple years ago. And so I think it was 2 years ago, you had a decision appealed on the gate at a port, or a fence, it was a fence, I believe. Anyhow, so the fact that you've been able to review 37 projects without a single appeal, I think is a statement in itself, and that's why we've included that sentence.
Any other questions, comments? Any public comment? I will entertain a motion.
I'll entertain, I'll make a motion to, which one am I here? E4?
Rob.
I'll recommend, make a motion to approve the 2018 Historic Resource Commission Annual Report to the Board of Supervisors as presented by staff.
Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions?
Did you want to add the inventory in the downtown?
Yeah, add the inventory.
You want me to do that?
Just a minute, yes.
Included in the report to the Board of Supervisors is the inventory of the downtown.
Second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. E5, for possible action, HRC-18-186, to elect Historic Resources Commission Chairman and Vice Chair for the period February 2019 to January 2020. Hope.
It's January, so you need to elect a chair and a vice chair, and with that, I will turn it back to you.
I will open nominations for chairman.
I suggest we nominate Mike Drews to continue as chairman.
I second.
Are there any other nominations?
Well, I think we should, put Don's name in there since he's gone.
Yeah, that's
But I just want to make sure that there's no problem with that. I don't have a problem with that, but it says that the chair can only be 2 consecutive years, and this is year 3. But it doesn't seem like there's an overly exuberant other member that wants to be the chair. So does that create an issue for?
Can we vote to override that?
It's not a mandate that it turn over every 2 years. It's a recommendation, and this has been reviewed with the DA's office in past years, and the DA's office is okay with the continuation of the chair if that's what the commission chooses to do.
Perfect. I would like to close the nominations for chairman.
Second.
If there are no other nominations,
You're starting your 30th year,
we'll close nominations. All in favor of the only nominee, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I guess I'm it again.
It's easier to have you than have you kick one of us.
Yeah, it's true.
During one of the meetings all the time, so.
It's harder passing notes than it is
Yeah,
just,
right.
Open nominations for vice chair.
I'll nominate Rob Darney.
Seem to be working.
I'll second that.
Any other nominations?
Do we nominate Don?
I think you should nominate Don, just,
I'll nominate Don Smith.
It's a close
Second.
any other nominations? Nominations are closed. All in favor of Rob Darney for vice chair?
Aye.
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 We have 3. All in favor of, Rob, you're not voting?
I'm gonna vote for Don.
All in favor of Don Schmidt?
Aye.
I don't want Don to feel left out or neglected,
almost
so
was vice chair.
I'll vote for Don. Congratulations.
So it sounds like the election, 3-2 in favor of Rob Darney. So we have a new vice chair. Congratulations, Rob. You tried.
Keep up the good campaign.
Item F, staff reports.
Okay, so since your last meeting, there's been 3 administrative approvals. Dr. Yen Solar was approved administratively. She got to a point to where I think the HRC needed her to be. You may recall I ended up canceling that meeting. The chair said, she's where we kept asking to get to, let's just approve it. So we were really grateful for that. The chair also approved a project with gutters and also approved a fence. Things to think about for upcoming meetings. At the next meeting, we'll be reviewing the scavenger hunt. So we'll need to think about themes and things like that. Something I had thought of, I'll just put out there for you to think about, is maybe rather than photographs, think about the sort of the history in itself and have people go find, who was one of the 4 founders of Carson City and where is his house? Where was his sandstone found? And so it's more cerebral and less graphical, and they have to kind of figure out what these components are of the history of Carson. So just a thought for something different. We need to think about the HPF grant, and you had a tiny bit of discussion on that, and maybe looking at an inventory downtown and try to figure out how to put that together and make the matches and things. But if there's other ideas for the HPF grant, that would be appropriate. Then we'll be talking about those at the next meeting. And we'll be thinking about the preservation awards and coming up with nominations at your next meeting. So those are 3 big programs you have, and we'll be tackling those at the next meeting. Thank you.
Commissioner reports or comments. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. F1, Commissioner.
I've got a question
Comments.
for probably you, Hope. The little kiosk that we had made due to our competition thing 10 years ago, the little dome, the Capitol Dome kiosk that was on Main Street. Any plans on if we're going to reinstall that somewhere? I believe it's sitting on the ground out in the Railroad Museum or somewhere odd.
It's installed.
Is it back in place now?
The kiosk is over by the Chamber of Commerce, and the Chamber of Commerce put a fair amount of money, from what I understand, into trying to clean it up and everything, and it's just, it's on state property, but the Chamber of Commerce has that.
Okay, so it's being used.
It's being used.
I didn't know that outcome of that.
Yeah, that was a $25,000 kiosk, and at least it's not sitting in the yard anymore. Just another question with the Historic Preservation Awards. Do the historic properties have to be in the historic district? Because we have stuff on the peripheral, like there's one on Fleshman, there's Adele's, kind of stuff that's on the exterior part, because I've never had my mind wrapped around outside the district.
Now, in the past, we've gone outside. In the past, we've actually gone with in the district, new buildings within the district and outside as well.
Well, I guess we did the ovens too.
Yeah, so it's within Carson City, so.
I think if it's considered a Carson City resource, that it qualifies for us, yeah.
Just some things to kind of put on the radar. Other historic districts, other properties where we have some properties on Roop Street that are outside of the district but are considered within the district. There's certainly other historic properties in town that we could annex to our local district and maybe get a slightly better foothold than we have now for review on those properties or those areas. I think it's something SHPO's looking at for us to do, is to broaden our inventory and bring more into our districts or under our purview. So it's something to look at. The other thing too, Hope, some kind of signage that says a project has been approved by HARC. It seemed like last year especially, we get quite a few calls about people questioning whether projects were approved when it's not in the public forefront. And I mean, Carson City doesn't do it for their major projects, but I know a lot of other cities post for any building project that it's going to the Planning Commission or has been approved by the Planning Commission and things like that. And I think that might go a long ways in alleviating some phone calls. Any other reports, comments?
I just kind of curious about doing interpretive stuff because when we think about stuff that's been moved, down on Rip and Caroline Street, there was a place and it was the Atherton home and it was called Sunnyside and it's a mound house now that it actually got moved. There's the house where Bodwin Homes is, the house that you go up Coombs Canyon that's, I think, going into foreclosure, that old one, that was moved there too. Is there some way for us to get involved with that or to spearhead something to put a marker or something at a location or kind of thing?
I think if somebody comes to us with a demolition or removal or something like that, I certainly think we could make it a condition of approval that we do some kind of interpretive element to that as mitigation.
Another thing, because I'm always talking about signage when you're in the district, and that's something because the city does have a sign shop, but is that another avenue that maybe we could pursue redevelopment funds because a lot of area number 1 is in the historic district?
That's what we've talked about in the past, is maybe just a little
Topper.
attachment to a topper on the street signs or something, so that people know when they're in and out.
I think when we talk about the HPF grant, and we already know that we can't get funding for interpretation, but that would be an appropriate avenue to discuss these type of things, and it may be that we have to pursue other grants than the HPF grant for that type of signage and monuments and things.
Are we considering an inventory of the east side of Carson?
I think we need to look at we've had one done.
We have.
I just can't remember, it's probably been 10 or 15 years.
That was a question I got from the board when I went in front of them, and they asked about the east side.
Yeah, I know there's a couple board members very interested in the east side. But it's something else to consider. The problem with the HPF funds are we can go big, but we've got to find that 50% match, and it gets to be tough because there's only so many people in planning. We could use some of our time on it, but finding that match is difficult, so maybe we can get creative with that as well. Hope, is SHPO going to be at our next meeting to do our review, and maybe we can run some HPF questions by them at the same time?
Actually, that's a great idea. Yes, Jim is invited to our next meeting. We're meeting with SHPO staff regarding as a CLG, we're kind of getting an audit, if you will. We had one last year, we'll have one this year. And he'd like to attend the meeting. So I think that's a great idea to talk more about the programming that SHPO's running and operating and how we can better avail ourselves to it.
Yeah, I think that would be worthwhile.
Can Rob give us a update on the porch? Because I'm interested.
It's not agendized.
Oh, you have to do that?
Yeah,
Can we have that on the next?
sure.
Okay. Images?
You do have a cell phone.
Oh, yeah.
Sounds like we have stuff to do for the year, so.
Camera thing, I'll figure that out.
Okay, and, yeah, maybe for the next agenda too, let's try to I think we left off in September discussing
Yes.
windows and the three of us, I think I have 2 paragraphs done, but 3 of us volunteered to do some wordsmithing, so maybe we should put that on the agenda. Hopefully have something to discuss. So if we can get that by the first week in March, or by the end of February, so that we can agendize it and get it in the packets. Any other future agenda items? Move on to G, public comments. Members of the public who wish to address the commission may approach the podium at this time to speak on matters relevant to or within the authority of the Historic Resources Commission, including any matter that's not specifically included on the agenda as an action item. No action may be taken on a matter raised under the public comment portion of this agenda. Is there any additional public comments? Hearing none, we'll move to S, possible adjournment. Have a motion.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned unanimously.